It's January 8th, 2001. This is TNT number 4. Hello, everybody. Hello. Good to see you all again. There's some new people here. This is very informal. It's absolutely appropriate to ask questions at any point. We talk about things spiritual, and any topic or question or thing of interest that's more or less spiritual is quite appropriate. And I tell people, and I want to tell you new people too, that I don't ask anybody to believe anything I say. It could be pure nonsense. What's appropriate is to try to understand what I'm saying, whether you believe it or not. Try to understand what I'm saying, and then go forth in your life and see whether or not that turns out to be your experience too. These classes are really the result of my years of spiritual study with a variety of teachers and masters, and this is what I got, and it's time to pass on some of it, some of the ways I look at things and some of the practices I do, and so that's what I'm doing. And my teachers may have lied to me. I mean, it's my experience, and it's very clear to me that that's not the case, but there's no reason for you to believe it. So hear what I say, let it in, understand it, listen with your heart, not with your intellect, because spiritual topics never make sense intellectually. The spiritual truth is often, if not always, the direct opposite of the material truth. So just hear what's being said tonight and ask questions, and let's all understand, and hope we get a good dialogue going and have some fun. We had been talking the last 3 talks about different ways of looking at everything. And I think tonight we're going to start talking a little bit about spiritual practice, because there are so many different kinds of spiritual practice, and if you think there's a you, then spiritual practice is probably appropriate. It's the quick way and the only way to make progress. I was listening to a Robert CD the other night. Robert Adams was my guru, by the way, for those who don't know. And the experience that I have had as a result of being with Robert Adams. So I share a lot about Robert, and people that come around here hear a lot about Robert and listen to Robert tapes and borrow Robert CDs and get exposed to that consciousness, which is the most incredible consciousness I've ever encountered. Anyway, I was listening to Robert, and his statement at the start of the CD was that the first principle of spiritual practice is leave everything alone. And he means that very precisely. Leave everything alone. He often made a statement, don't let your thoughts go past the end of your nose. And what he's saying is that everything past your nose, or everything out there, so to speak, is effect. It's an outpicturing of the content of your consciousness, and it's an effect, and it's not a cause, and there's nothing to be done about anything out there. The work has to be in here, in the consciousness. in your own personal consciousness, in your own beliefs. What you see is what you believe. What you believe is what you see. It's a lot like looking in a mirror and seeing your picture in the mirror and seeing that your hair is all messed up and grabbing a comb and combing the mirror. Doesn't work. That's an effect. That's an outpicturing of your appearance. What you do is you come back here and comb your hair. And amazingly enough, the picture in the mirror cleans up. And this is the principle that we use in all spiritual work. What we do is we work on our own understanding and our own consciousness. And since our entire experience is an outpicturing of the content of our own consciousness, as we work on our consciousness, that picture cleans up. And we all have experience with that.
What if, say, for example, your son's going to his father's house and things are happening there, and he comes home and he's very upset? Is that still an outpicturing of my consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
So if I change my focus on that, then things aren't going to be the same there?
That's right. Yep, your son is entirely under your consciousness in his earlier years. As he gets older, he becomes under his own consciousness. But no, what you see, how you interpret it, what you think is happening, is a result of what's in your consciousness. And whatever concept you have about what's happening is not what's happening. So, yeah, it's true, you work on yourself. Robert really means leave everything alone. Don't go out there. Don't worry about that stuff. Don't try to fix it. If you try to correct what's out there, the task is interminable. It's endless. There's always something wrong out there. It's never right. Your shack is not good enough. You buy a $100,000 house. A year later, you need a $250,000 house. A year later, you need a $500,000 house. And a year later, the Strand's looking good. This goes on forever. You finally get a $5 million house right on the Strand, and then you notice that the fixtures in the bathroom are not solid gold. And the list goes on forever. And the people are never right. They never treat you the way you should be treated. And nobody ever loves you as much as you need to be loved. And yeah, it's interminable out there. And if you look at your own experience, you realize that whenever you get something you want, there's the top thing on your list. There's a moment of satisfaction, maybe even a moment of happiness, and then the next thing on your list springs up to the top. It's like a push-down. It's like the stack of plates in the buffet restaurants, where you take the plate off the stack and the next one pushes up, List of things you want is just like that. Every time you take one off, the next one pops up. So the spiritual practice is about leaving everything alone out there. And the question is, how do we do that? And just as an aside, I watched the movie the other night, or the other afternoon with my granddaughter. We went to see It's a Beautiful Mind, and which is a beautiful movie. But what was interesting, for those of you who did see it and those who didn't, the man is a paranoid schizophrenic. And he sees things that aren't there in his waking state, like we see things that aren't there in our dreaming state, but he sees things that aren't there in his waking state. And, he not only sees them, but he hears them and smells them, and he can hold them and pick them up. His imaginary roommate has an imaginary daughter, and he could hug the daughter, these people were really very real for him. And what he learned to do, he got the information that these people aren't real, and he learned which ones aren't real and which ones are real, and proceeded to just ignore the ones that he knew weren't real, which is to say he learned to leave them alone. He stopped interfacing with them. He stopped talking with them. He stopped reacting to them. He stopped taking care of them. He just learned to leave those people alone. And when he met somebody new, the great scene where somebody comes up, a stranger comes up and talks to him, and he's on the way out of class, and there's a gal coming out of the class, and he stops her and says, "Do you see him?" And she says, "Yes." He says, "Oh, okay, you're real." And so now he starts talking to the guy, but he wants to know whether this guy is a real guy or an imaginary guy, you know. He wants to know whether to leave him alone or not. And of course, I'm sitting there chuckling the whole time because I know none of them are real, including him. But that was a good example. So that's what we're talking about, the discipline of learning to leave them alone. You can either itemize them and go through the list and leave him alone, leave her alone, and leave her alone, you know, and leave the balcony alone and leave the, you know. You can either do this endless list of leaving them alone, or you can turn around and go to the source. Robert always recommends as the fastest, the most powerful spiritual practice is the practice of self-inquiry. And that's mostly what we're going to talk about tonight. We may bring up some other things too, but the practice of self-inquiry. Instead of dealing with what's out there, instead of wondering whether this person is real, the question is, who is wondering? Instead of trying to figure out if this one's real and that one's false and this is happening and that isn't, the question that self-inquiry is about is to try to discover who it is that's wondering, whether this is real or not. The source of all of our problems, of all of our emotional reactions, of all of everything, the problem is entirely the fact that for some silly reason we think that we are an independent entity that's separate from God. You know, God is not concerned about any of the things out there. God does not have issues with any of the things that are going on. The problem is that if I have an issue with anything out there, if I think something out there is real, if I think I need to deal with it, it's because I think that I, Lee, individual, separate from God, material Lee, is real. So the error is not in worrying, is not in believing that those are real. The error is in believing that this is real, that I am real. And self-inquiry is the practice which begins to erode that fundamental belief that is so deeply ingrained in all of us, of our own personal reality as a separate entity from God. And the way self-inquiry works is whenever any situation is presented to you, you simply ask yourself, to whom is this situation presented? Instead of trying to fix the situation with your son or your son's father, you inquire, who is concerned about the situation with my son or my son's father? Who is it that's concerned about this? And generally your mind will come back with the answer, well, I am. I'm concerned about this. And then you ask the question, well, who is this I? Who is this I that's concerned? Where did this I come from? And that's the question. And look around in there. Don't come up with an intellectual answer, because if you come up with an intellectual answer, that's just your ego responding to you. So don't come up with an answer, even if you know some clever spiritual answer like, well, who is this I? Oh, well, I am choiceless, effortless, pure awareness, you know. I am ultimate oneness, you know. Don't go there. check, go inside and see who this I is. Just inquire of yourself, who is this I? And sit quietly. And when the next thing comes up, you repeat the procedure. You say, to whom does this come? Well, it comes to me. Oh, okay, well, who is this me? Well, this me inside of me, raise your hand. Who is this me? It's a great way to deal with the committee, by the way. When you wake up in the morning and the committee is chattering, when somebody you hear this snide remark about you, you just say, who said that? Just ask who said that. It gets very quiet. Who said that? All right, raise your hand. Who said that? It's the same thing exactly. Try that. It works. The committee will get quiet if you just ask them to raise their hand, because, of course, nobody's there to raise their hand. The same technique is used to quiet your mind. If you're in meditation or you're trying to be in meditation and a thought comes to you, instead of beating yourself up about the thought or worrying about the practice or worrying about whether you're doing this or that, this right or that right, or being upset with yourself for not being silent, simply ask yourself, to whom does this thought come? Who's thinking this thought? And again, the answer may be, I am. And then you ask, well, who is this I? Where does this I come from? You're looking for the source of this I that's running your life.
Is that the same as being in a state of the observance where you're actually just watching yourself?
If you're in the state of just watching yourself, you would ask, who is watching myself? Because there's still a you there. And that you who is watching yourself will stop watching yourself before long. Always the question is, who is this person? Everything is oriented around the ego, around the I thought. And the idea of I, the concept of I, is just a thought. It's not a reality. Our minds chatter so incessantly about whether I'm going to get this, or I'm going to lose that, or I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do that, or I'm going to get enough sleep, or he's going to do this for me, or she's going to do this to me, or they're going to take this from me, or they're going to give that to me, or, this endless thinking about I has produced the illusion that there is such a thing. And you can check at any moment, although you won't believe the story, but you can check at any moment by being silent. When you're silent, there's no I. There is no I without the thought I. Between thoughts, there's no I. It's just open awareness.
So Lee, is it just to bring yourself to be more aware of the situation? Like, say Joe Schmo buys a house next year and it's better, and you're sitting there asking yourself, and jealousy comes up, for instance, and then you sit quietly. Are you just aware that it's jealousy and then it'll disappear eventually?
No, you ask who's jealous. You don't want to get rid of the jealousy. You want to get rid of the Kelly.
So then you would do
you ask, who thinks he's got this neat house? To whom does this situation come, this thought come? And if you say, well, I'm jealous about it, who's jealous? To whom does the jealousy come? Who's jealous? I'm jealous. But who is this I that's jealous? Just constantly, relentlessly trying to identify the one who, trying to find this one. I just mentioned, I just made the claim that there is no real I, that it's just a thought. It's an impression that we have, a concept we have as a result of the incessant chattering of our minds about ourselves. Okay? And what I'm asking is, find out whether or not that's true. Don't believe that. We're thoroughly conditioned to believe that there is an I, a separate entity I. I'm claiming that there is no such thing, that all there is this relentless chatter of I this and I this and I, and on and on. You know, and this relentless chatter about I and me and my creates the illusion of there being this entity. Mm-hmm.
Kind of describe the day-to-day. It's really, I haven't been able to get out of it, this human consciousness, but this huge eucalyptus tree 5 feet from my bedroom has been diagnosed with this heart rot, and if we don't get it removed, it's going to fall on me. And, and I'm really like, I got to do something, I got to, talk to my landlady and get it out, and it's going to, and I'm thinking, well, if I keep thinking it's going to fall on me, won't I make it fall on me? And I'm like, I'm living, and I was really into all that chattering today.
Sure.
I've got to talk to this artist, I've got to talk to this person, and I. I'm the one that's going to die. It's any way for a gardener to go, but still. So, how can I apply this?
Absolutely. Who's the one that's going to die? Who's the one that's worried about the tree going to fall? Who's the one that thinks she needs to call the landlady? Who's the one? Whenever any of these things, these things are obviously causing you a bit of anxiety, a bit of angst.
Huge.
And when the angst starts, when the anxiety starts, the question is, to whom, who's concerned? To whom does this anxiety come? Many years ago, the first guy that I talked with, actually, he never became my sponsor, but the first guy I talked to explained to me about how to deal with anxiety. He says, I'll tell you what I do with anxiety. He says, when I feel that little tightening, I say, seems like anxiety is coming on. And he says, then a while later, I say, yep, it sure feels like anxiety. He says, then sometime later, I say, the anxiety's gone. Okay? So the question is, who feels like anxiety is coming on? Who feels like she's anxious? Who feels like she needs to call the landlady? Who feels like the tree's going to die? Who feels like the tree's going to fall on her? Who feels like she's going to die? Who feels like that's an appropriate way for a gardener to die? Who feels like she's a gardener? Okay?
Yeah.
Sentence by sentence, thought by thought.
So, this do nothing or leave everything alone. So just don't listen to all that human consciousness, all that.
Don't listen to the babble. That's doing nothing.
So.
What did you do today? What did you actually do?
About the situation.
Yes,
I talked to our arborists and talked to my landlady. And,
okay.
We're meeting with someone on Thursday.
So some things got done.
Yeah.
They would have got done whether you thought about them or not, whether you'd gotten anxious about it or not, whether you had this endless chatter, that still would have happened.
Yeah. Right, yeah.
It would have happened spontaneously rather than your having spent hours spinning about it.
So you still take care of these kind of things, but
they will be taken care of. It is possible, if you did not have a single thought all day, if you had not had one thought, they still would have been taken care of. Those things still would have happened.
That's right. Yeah. Okay.
That which takes care of things like trees budding in the spring and not budding in the fall and stuff like that, that thing that takes care of everything will take care of you too, unless you're in there actively taking charge yourself and mucking it up.
That's what I feel like I'm doing.
Oh, yeah, that is what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, Lee, how does the self-inquiry pertain to physical pain? If we are just a picture on the screen, and I'm thinking about myself now because usually that's what I think about the most.
Maintaining the illusion.
Yeah, when I broke my shoulder skiing last weekend, and I asked, who does the pain come? And I say the pain comes to me. And I ask, well, who is this me? That doesn't make the pain in my shoulder go away. I can make it, my mind will quiet down, but the pain still radiates in my shoulder. So how does self-inquiry work with physical pain?
Well, see, you're absolutely clinging to the illusion that there is a you who has the pain. Okay? You want something to work to get rid of the pain that you're feeling, which is believing in the reality of you as a separate entity. Now, self-inquiry is about getting rid of that entity.
So if I get rid of that entity, I'll get rid of the pain?
No, he'll get rid of you. It's not that I want to get rid of the pain, I want to get rid of the I. Getting rid of the I, then who has the pain? It sounds like double talk, but it's great fun watching a lot of the masters like Ramana Maharshi died of cancer, and Nisargadatta Maharaj died of cancer, and several, and Ramakrishna died of cancer. And, the devotees were all very upset about this and very worried about this and great anxiety about it, but none of the masters were at all concerned about it. Nisargadatta was asked, "Are you in a great deal of pain?" And his answer is, "There is pain here." But see, he wasn't reacting to it. And as a result, of course, the pain was just a fraction of what it would be if you're distanced from the pain, it will be significantly less. If you're, not being uptight and tense about it, it will be significantly less. But the fact is that all of that's irrelevant. The lie is not the pain, the lie is the you that has the pain. And if the pain goes away and they give you drugs and you're on Demerol and you're feeling blissful, you ask, to whom does this bliss come? And do the self-inquiry on that. But see, there's no distinction. You don't just do it to get rid of pain. You don't just use it to get rid of lack and things like that. You use it to get rid of you. And when you realize who you truly are, then all of this is totally irrelevant. If you have a dream tonight that you break your shoulder and you're in great pain, and you either take some steps to get rid of the pain or you don't take steps to, the fact is that then you wake up. And the reality was that the person who had the pain never existed, and the pain never existed. Okay? And that's what's happening right here, right now. That's the Maya. That's the belief in the separate entity. And this is not a one evening or 1 week or 1 month or 1 year practice. This is a long, slow practice to erode this belief that you have that has been built into you lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and which is being reinforced by the 8 billion. It's not a quick practice, but the point is that it is working on the problem, whereas all other spiritual practices are not working on the problem. It's like the other spiritual practices are all pulling leaves off the tree one at a time, and of course the tree is growing new leaves. And there are so many leaves that you can't get all the leaves off in any given year, so that goes on forever, lifetime after lifetime. This approach, self-inquiry, is the axe at the tree trunk. Now, it may be a sequoia, but pulling the leaves off the sequoia is going to go on lifetime after lifetime interminably. And taking an axe to a sequoia will fell the sequoia at some point, at some time.
I really like that description of when you keep saying, who is this I who thinks there's something wrong here, who is this I who is the problem, who is this I, just the thought that that's interrupting the flow of the thinking. Because it's so easy when you're in the flow of the thinking to be, you're lost. You're like asleep. It's just thinking forever, thinking. And then, but when you say it, it interrupts that flow. And just the constant interruption of the flow, like, weakens it. That really helped me.
It really weakens it, and it really reduces the pain, in fact. In fact, your pain was undoubtedly less as a result of your being looking at the pain rather than caught up in it. You know, what always happens is a situation presents itself and we have a choice of either getting caught up in it or of looking at it. And if we get caught up in it, we're down the pike and we're until we come to our heads, come to our sanity. And if alternatively in the first 3 or 4 seconds we can catch it and look at it, then we're looking at it and we're not caught up. And it's the same thing in the script work, you know, once you recognize it's script, you're no longer caught up in the disaster, you're no longer in total meltdown, you're looking at the problem. As soon as you can get in the habit of catching the situation, now you have a chance of dealing with it. And if you, what we're saying is go a step further, and now that you're looking at the situation, instead of dealing with the situation, deal with the false assumption about the fact that there is someone to whom the situation is happening or who can deal with the situation, okay? That's the game. A real good advantage of this is you can do it about anything. And it's not like meditation. You can do it while you're driving your car. Who thinks that person cut me off? Who thinks the car in front of me is going too slow? Who thinks the car behind me is too close? You know, et cetera, et cetera. Who thinks I'm going to be late to work? You know, who thinks my boss is a bitch? You know, who thinks, you know, I mean, you can apply this to every single thought that comes up to you, happy or sad. And you can do as much self-inquiry as you choose to do. Mm-hmm.
That was my comment, because I feel like I'm on this endless chase to be happy, joyous, and free. Stop the misery, and that's an error as well.
Absolutely.
To think that,
absolutely.
And there's no spiritual principle that God wants us happy or to be free, or that it's still thinking in the I.
You're thinking there's a you that God wants to be happy, joyous, and free. And I'm saying that if there's a you, that you has the potential for being happy, joyous, and free, and that you has the potential for being miserable and suffering, and being happy, joyous, and free will immediately, if you think there's a separate you, bring up the worry that you will soon stop being happy, joyous, and free, that you will lose it, or you will be happy, joyous, and free because of some reason, and you will immediately start worrying about the fact that that reason will end or that thing will be taken away from you. The new car makes you happy, joyous, and free. The first scratch makes you miserable. The rose makes me happy, joyous, and free. The petals on the table tomorrow morning are going to make me miserable. I mean, you know, I can play this game at whatever level I want to play, but it's all Maya. It's all part of the Maya. It's all part of the illusion. None of it's real. It's no more real than... So there's a you in a dream tonight. You're dreaming. And you're dreaming that you're in whatever situation it is. And in this dream, you want to be happy, joyous, and free. You're in a miserable situation, let's say. And you're dreaming that you want to be happy, joyous, and free. And you're dreaming that you think God wants you to be happy, joyous, and free. And so you're doing all sorts of things in your dream to be happy, joyous, and free. And I claim that, no, you don't want to be happy, joyous, and free. What you want to do is wake up. You know? Because the you isn't even there.
I just wanted to say that I've been reading Robert for a few years, and I still cannot grasp the concept that it's not real. I mean, I just feel nothing still when you say that. Mm-hmm. However, like a newcomer in AA, does not understand the full grasp of the experience that awaits them, they may just have the faith to just do what the next indicated action is. That's what we try to convince them when they're new. I understand that you can't grasp what freedom is really going to be like, but if you'll just do this, this, and this, and that's how I feel. I'm willing to just practice self-inquiry because I know the results it's brought thus far, and then it'll continue to bring, even though I can't mentally conceive where it's going to take me.
That's where I'm stuck, is that I want a result, and that's the whole problem.
Well, I mean, there are intermediate results all the way along, because if, insofar as there is a you, or even that's not right, but the way the Leela works is that each individual you in the Leela has a better experience as his or her consciousness rises. So the more truth you understand, the more spiritual truth you understand, the closer you get to these truths, the more intermediate stuff you understand, the better the picture gets. Just like I was saying earlier, if you're looking in the mirror and you work over here on your hair, the picture clears up. It is true, insofar as there is a human being, insofar as there is an individual, that your experience is an outpicturing of your current state of consciousness. So as your consciousness rises, your picture gets better. This talk, that's what the talks were about, the last three ones, and the whole class before that was about that principle. Now what we're talking about is that there's a shorter way than that, or a different way than that, and we're talking about the real truth, which is that even metaphysics is not the reality. Metaphysics is a higher truth than materialism, but mysticism is a higher truth than metaphysics. And these enlightened masters who had cancer could have cared less about it because there was no one to care. I spent years with Robert, who had Parkinson's disease, and that was the one thing that probably gave me the most realization of all, is being with this man who, according to us, had Parkinson's disease, because it was just so clear to me, being in his consciousness for those many years, that he didn't think he had Parkinson's disease. And that wasn't his body. That was a dream. Like there was a dream going on that this body that people call Robert had Parkinson's disease, but that had nothing to do with him. He was the absolute consciousness in which the Leela was taking place. Or, if you were God, you wouldn't care about this sore shoulder. If you knew you were God and not you, then you wouldn't be at all concerned about the sore shoulder, is the point. Okay, so it's pretty clear what self-inquiry is. I mean, this is not rocket physics. This is very simple to practice. It's also very difficult. It's either you can do it or you can't, because to some people it's just pure nonsense. It seems like a silly, pointless game, and some people can't bring themselves to do it. And if that's the case, then there are other practices that are appropriate to do to lift yourself to the point where you can practice self-inquiry.
There's a line in Robert Swift that says, some people will think that it's just boring, or either too difficult or just plain boring.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say that it's difficult, but it's nonsense is what it is. It's just sheer nonsense to sit here and say, I got this problem going on, and to be ignoring the problem and doing self-inquiry is patently absurd to people who are not yet ready to do this practice. And what it is a measure of your investment in the belief that there is a you and your investment in the world. For example, back to the first statement, leave everything alone. If you've got a lot of kid work to do, you will not be able to leave everything alone because your kid's in a total panic. Okay? And so here's a case where the appropriate response to a kid in total panic is not self-inquiry because nothing's going to happen there. The appropriate response is kid work. So there are things that can be done first. Self-inquiry is for people who have gotten some amount of peace and quiet in their life. And you will be able to practice self-inquiry to the extent that you have some adulting gear, as we say, some amount of center. Another spiritual practice, which is for people who can't do or don't choose to do self-inquiry, is surrender. Surrenders are sort of like a good, it's a real good spiritual practice. And there's a lot of foundation for surrender in AA. And surrender, what Robert really means by surrender is surrendering absolutely everything to God. Okay? Turning everything over to God. And this is, as I say, quite familiar to those of us who are in the 12-step programs. It says in the 11th step, or the 3rd step or 11th, I think it's 11th step, maybe it's in the 3rd step, those two meetings, it says essentially, that He will provide for us if we do His work well. I guess that's in the 3rd step section, huh? Yeah. And, surrender is realizing that God is the one with all the power. And God has the plan, and I don't have the plan, and that God's plan for me is none of my business, let alone God's plan for you is none of my business. God's plan for me is none of my business. That my only job is to bring the willingness to do what's put in front of me. And that's a practice which will lead to the quietness which will allow the self-inquiry. Or it may be the sufficient path in itself if you surrender completely to God. If you completely give yourself to God, all the incessant I thoughts will stop, and and the illusion of the individual I will disappear that way. So surrender is another perfectly good, perfectly acceptable spiritual practice. And of course you can only surrender as much as you can surrender. If you have kid work to do, you will not be able to turn over to the will of God, even those areas which have your kid in a panic. I guess we may as well do the third technique that Robert always supported, and that is what he calls the I am meditation. This is sort of a cross between a meditation and a mantra, but it's what it boils down to is a way of defocusing from all that stuff out there that we're trying to leave alone and getting quiet and getting centered. And that may be as much as you can do, in which case that's wonderful. That's also just wonderful if you can find a way of defocusing from that and focusing here on how you on being centered. And that technique starts out by getting quiet, getting comfortable, and just watching your breath and getting quiet. You may want to go through the exercise of relaxing your arms and relaxing your legs. You may want to go through ankles and knees and thighs and part by part in your body. Tell yourself to relax that and get comfortable and get quiet and watch your breath. And I find that it's good to either watch your breath in and out of your nose, or you can watch the place here that rises and falls the most. But pick some point, some physical point, and watch the breath. You can watch it there, you can feel it here, you can feel it in your nose, but watch your breath. Just watch your breath. And after you quietly watch your breath for a short time, inquire, who is it that's watching his or her breath? And the answer will come, I am. And now just every time you inhale, say I. And every time you exhale, say am. So you breathe in with I and you breathe out with M. And you breathe in with I and you breathe out with M, and you're getting focused on this I am. And this will tend to center you, and it gets you single-minded. And before you can become no-minded, it helps to become single-minded, because then there's just one thing to stop. If you're truly doing this and you're truly focused, is the way to get into the silence. Because when you're trying to get into the silence, whenever a thought comes up, you ask them, does this thought come? Who's thinking this thought? And perhaps it says I am, and you say, well, who is this I? But you listen for an answer. And when you're listening for an answer, there's either silence or there's the next thought, in which case you say, to whom does this thought come? And that gets really old really fast, and the thoughts will stop coming, and the gaps between the questions will get further and further apart. The gap will get longer between the thoughts coming, so that's a good way to get into the silence. The point of all spiritual practice, the only point of all spiritual practice, is to get silent, to get into the silence, not to get quiet, but to get into the silence. And by that, as I've said before, I don't mean a place where there's no noise. I mean a place where there's no li, the lack of self, not the lack of sound. And when you are in the silence, you will have the experience of truth. And there will no longer be any question about whether or not this is true or not. When you've had the experience, you've had the experience. So the real point of all spiritual practice, of yogas, of all the different kinds of yoga, from Hatha yoga to Kriya yoga to Kundalini yoga to all the yogas, and meditations, all the kinds of meditations, and of all the practices of reciting the names of God that they like to do in India, and reciting mantras. And the ultimate point of all these practices is to teach you to get into the silence. There's a really nice silence here now. And if your head is running, ask it to whom the thoughts are coming. And see if you can cause a gap. It's easier to find silence when you're with people who are also finding the silence. If you're in a group and there are enough people who can find the silence, we get pulled in. If there are not enough who can find the silence, it comes apart. But it certainly works better in a group like this to do it together. We've seen that at the 11-step meeting. The silence at the 11-step meeting is getting so big now because we've been doing it for a while that everybody just gets sucked right in. And it's so neat. That's why that meeting is so big right now and so good. Did anybody have any experiences in a little silence or any questions or anything that came up that they'd like to mention?
I knew it meditation, but I felt like I was asleep.
That you were asleep?
I felt like I was asleep, but I knew I wasn't asleep. Or I caught myself almost sleeping.
Mm-hmm. Yep, we all have that experience at first, but
I can do that, thank you.
The secret of learning to meditate is to do it for short periods of time. Don't make a marathon out of it. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to who is thinking this thought, and who is this I? And after I came up with who is this I, it was like, nobody. Like there really isn't anybody there. Is that right?
Is that your experience?
Yeah.
Then that's your experience. Yeah.
That's the outcome we're looking for?
No. No, there's no set outcome you're looking for. If there's a you looking, ask who it is that's looking. But it's a step. I mean, there's one example where you were looking for that I and couldn't find it. Okay? That's a chip away. That's one whack of the axe against the sequoia.
That kind of diffused everything. It was like, okay,
Absolutely. Yeah.
there's nothing here. Okay.
That's right. And in that moment, there are no problems.
Yeah, that's
There's no dis-ease.
That's right.
Yeah. We have to sustain our thinking about our I, our endless chain of thinking about ourselves. We have to sustain that very carefully in order to maintain our problems and our misery. If we just pause for a second in our thinking, we've lost our misery, we've lost our pain, it's all disappeared, until we think again. We have to really work very hard to sustain our misery. The default is bliss.
That's the first experience I became aware of it. The more I practice being in the silence, the more I feel able to leave the world alone.
Mm-hmm.
And the less I'm reacting to the world, the more I'm able to get into silence. It's like it builds.
Exactly. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And the more I'm out reacting to the world, the harder it is for me to get into the silence.
Mm-hmm.
It goes the other way
Sure.
too.
It's the same thing. It's the I that's creating the world. And if you're out there or in here, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's all you. I mean, if you're out beyond the end of your nose, as Robert would say, that's exactly the same. And believing in that is the same thing as believing that there's a personal I. It's all just the I thought. What's fun is to start paying attention to your thoughts. Start noticing the gaps. Notice between thoughts. If your head's run, stop it. And just stop for a second. You can't stop your mind. Rajneesh always used to laugh and say, how shall I stop my mind with my mind? And he just laughed because you can't stop your mind, but what you can do is look at it for a second and say, stop. And see this pause. And then immediately your mind says, is that it? And that was it. You lost it. Is this it? No, not anymore. Now I'm quiet. Nope, no, maybe you were, but now you're not, But you can see the gaps. And the gaps get longer and longer. And you get to the place where there's no thinking going on, except when you need to say something or do something. But all that space in between isn't filled with thoughts. It's not like you're thinking for an hour, chattering for an hour, and then you have to make a decision to do something. What you are is you're silent for an hour, and then you find out that you do something.
God, I could never imagine something like that. Constantly.
Yep.
That sounds like heaven.
It is. The default is bliss. You had something, Tricia.
I just found that my experience was that I didn't have an answer. It was a sigh, and then it was silent, and I was like, wow. And as soon as I thought, is it gonna go away? You know, and then I was like, oh wait, who is that thinking that would go away? I was like, darn. But it was.
But you had the gap.
I was just paying attention to the gap, and there was still a gap, and then all of a sudden the thought was like, well, is it gonna go away?
It's a separation. It's almost an experience of a separation. I mean, that's been my experience.
Yeah.
But when I get into the silence, I experience my body actually falling away. There's like no body. If there's no body, there's no I. That's where I want to be.
Sure. I mean, the experiences that come with it, there are lots of different ways. I mean, the problem with experiences is that the mechanism which we have with which to experience things is this small finite mechanism. So all the experiences that we have are always interpretations, which are of course limited by the level of our consciousness. So there's that little caveat there, I guess you would call it, about that. But experiences become less and less material. You have experiences of the body not being yours, and you can have experiences of the body not being material. You can have the experience of the body actually being just consciousness. And if you're in the experience of your own body being just consciousness, then everybody else's body is just consciousness, because there's no other possibility. Because, if I'm material, you're material, and if I'm consciousness, you're consciousness. I can't have one of us material and the other one consciousness. That doesn't work.
You could definitely see how that deflates things. I mean, if you realize that, from one step, saying, it's not me, it's them, as one step, basically. If you're in an argument with somebody, it's not about me, it's really what they're dealing with at that time, right? And then being able just to, you deflate that right away, and then you can also do the consciousness. Then it basically takes, for instance, like a jealousy issue, it just poofs it away, because that's the Maya.
That's the whole, but yeah, that's the whole point. And there's the immediate practical results of this practice is, instead of having your stomach in a knot in jealousy, what you're doing is having a intellectual experience with yourself, wondering who it is that's jealous. And that's a lot easier to sit with, wondering of who's jealous, than it is to sit with jealousy, or rage, or what have you. I mean, all the things
there in itself, it becomes gratitude shot, so to speak, because then you're able to take that little bit, which isn't huge, but it's a little bit, and you can, at least it pushes you to continue.
Oh, and it's a start. And once you realize that you don't need to be jealous, then you give that up, and then you realize, gradually there are other things that you don't need to be, because you learn how to look at them instead of being them. And as this goes on, you get quieter and quieter and quieter, and the gaps start happening. It's all very constructive, direct work.
It's amazing. I had an experience about a week ago, and I feel like I'm just such a baby in all of this, but it's just funny, because one of my girlfriends, who I haven't seen in a couple of weeks, she said, God, you just look so content, what are you doing? And I was thinking, what? What is she talking about? And she's like, you just look so calm, and you're not bothered by anything. And I was going, where's she coming from? I'm just, but it's true. I mean, I think it happens.
Sure.
Without you realizing it.
And it happens slowly, and it happens at whatever pace it's going to happen, but it always happens, and every minute that you spend will improve the picture. It may not improve it enough that you can measure it, but every minute that you spend is well spent. After a while, just so that some of you will know, if you do start doing self-inquiry, like when you're driving, let's say, or something. For me, it stopped getting. I stopped hearing the I. To whom do these thoughts come? They come to me. Well, who is this I? Who is this me? Where does me come from? The last two sentences, I stopped saying, well, who is this me? Where did the me come from? And then I stopped hearing it's me. And it got to the point where I would just say who, and I'd be in full stop. Situation would start, and I'd say who, as in, who's doing this, but I mean just the short form who, and I was, just dropped into the silence. So that's a skill that's well worth developing. To be able to just say who and drop into the silence.
It's funny, I was thinking of how miserable my day was today, but I realized this whole thing makes so much sense to me because of what happened today. I have that draw, just keep drawing from
Yeah. What a waste of energy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the damn tree didn't even fall.
And he didn't die.
What a waste of time.
What tree? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? Let's be quiet for another couple of minutes. Practice it for a minute or two. Get all the way there once. Just one good gap. Here it is. Okay, thank you.